Jesus plus nothing. 100% natural. No additives. Andrew Farley celebrating your freedom in Christ. Call in and ask your questions at 877-655-6755. That's toll free at 877-655-6755. Via satellite from Texas, it's Andrew Farley Live.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Andrew Farley Live. This is Andrew. We are live for the next half hour taking your calls, 877-655-6755. Right now, we've got wide open lines, and that means plenty of room for you to get in with your question tonight. If you've got a question about a scripture passage, maybe there's something you heard in church recently, and you're still scratching your head wondering about it, then let's make it a conversation together. Right now, 877-655-6755. And if you're a first-time caller, you got to know we love to hear from our first-time callers. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're a veteran listener, maybe you've called in the past, but you've got something new on your mind tonight, by all means, join us as well. Again, that number, 877-655-6755. And if you've got a personal problem going on in your life right now, maybe something happening in your church, with your kids, in your family, with your marriage, whatever it might be, you're looking for that grace-based perspective. Well, my friend, that is exactly why we're here for the next half hour for you. Give us a call right now, 877-655-6755. We've got 3 open lines, which is very rare at this point. So if you've ever thought about calling in, tonight is your night. We are live this Wednesday evening, and you'll be sure to get in right away. Again, toll-free across the United States and all of Canada. If you're in Canada, feel free to call us as well, 877-655-6755. We're going to start out tonight in Fort Worth, Texas, and we'll talk with Sean. Hey, Sean, what do you got for us tonight?
Hey, Andrew. I came across a new idea recently from somebody regarding the beast in Revelation, and I wanted to get your thoughts on it.
Okay.
Apparently, there's a view of the beast being Nero from the first century.
Right.
And I guess it has to do with the cryptogram and how 666 adds up to Nero Caesar, and textual variants like 616. All these things.
Yeah.
I just wanted to get your thoughts.
Yeah, I like it. I think it makes a lot of sense. I mean, I know it throws a wrench in the plans of those who want to just have this linear view of Revelation where everything has to be about the future. There's so many different views. There's preterism and partial preterism and all kinds of different views regarding the millennium. Is it to be taken literally, or should we go with some sort of premillennial rapture, mid-trib, post-trib, you name it. And so we've got pre and mid and post-trib, and then we've got views on the millennium itself, and then we've got views on prophecy in general, like the book of Daniel, the book of Revelation. I mean, as far as your question goes, my friend, I would say this. I look at Revelation chapter 13, and it just makes me think, all right, I've got a Jewish guy named John, 2,000 years ago. He's having a dream. He's having a vision. He's talking about, this kingdom or this leader, and there's 7 hills, and there's some sort of currency, some sort of mark, some sort of leader that's evil. Who is it that would be in the mind of the Apostle John? And I think, you're on to something when you lend some credibility to this view. You can play with the name Nero Caesar and come up with 666 according to a certain system of numeration. And furthermore, I would say you've got this idea of buying and selling and not being able to do it without this mark. Well, in Roman society 2,000 years ago, you couldn't buy or sell without Roman currency. And by the way, guess whose mark was on the currency. It was Nero. And so Nero was burning Christians and accusing them of all kinds of heinous things and punishing them publicly and turning them into entertainment for the Roman people. And it was pretty awful. And so you talk about tribulation. There was some tribulation going on then. And so you had to buy and sell with this currency. It had Nero's image on it. And without that, you were up a creek. In fact, the Jews were so upset about having to use this currency that at one point they invented their own currency. And so it shows you that this was on the minds of the Jewish people, at least, and likely Christians of any kind, who didn't want to look at the emperor of Rome as a god. And yet he was supposed to be revered as a god. That's how the Roman people saw him. And so if you wouldn't use Roman currency, you were rejecting Nero. You were rejecting the emperor of Rome. You were rejecting the concept of him being deity. And you say, well, you know, it was on their hands and on their foreheads, so to speak. Well, I mean, this would mean that they used it with their hands to buy and sell. It would be in the palm of their hand. And then secondly, money would be on their mind. You know, I mean, this is one theory, and I wouldn't die on a hill concerning it. I wouldn't defend it to the death. It's not that big of a deal. The big takeaway from the book of Revelation is that there was tribulation 2,000 years ago, and the readers of Revelation then were encouraged and were benefited by what John shared with them. And then here we are 2,000 years later. Christians still endure persecution around the world, and there's still tribulation. We just went through some tribulation this past year, right? 2020 is a year of tribulation. Are things going to get worse? Probably. At some point, in some ways, things are going to get worse and worse because you don't see a fallen world without Christ getting better and better. So expect more tribulation. And the book of Revelation is basically saying, here's a battle between sin and righteousness. Here's a battle between Satan and God is victorious. Jesus is the victor. He's the winner, and he's able to make us stand, and he's our rescuer. I mean, that to me is the big picture of Revelation. That's what we should take away from reading it. And as far as this theory that something about Revelation 13 refers to the present day in which John was writing, well, that makes all the sense in the world to me. I mean, are we really going to believe that a Jewish man from 2,000 years ago named John had a dream and a vision about, I don't know, who was it? Gorbachev in the 80s they claimed was the Antichrist, and then it was the Pope, and then it's, you name it. It's this president or that president, and then there'll be more theories coming down the pike. Are we really supposed to believe that there was no relevancy of this revelation, no relevancy 2,000 years ago? I'm not buying it. Everything else in the entirety of the New Testament was extremely relevant to the people of that day. Yet here we are as North Americans, as citizens of this planet, trying to map everything that we read onto our present day, 2,000 years later. And I think that's a mistake to do that. We end up with egg on our face. Look, is there still a return of Christ? Yes. Is it off in the future? Yes. Is he our rescuer? Absolutely. Is it a literal and physical return? Yes. Is there a future reign? Yes. Does it have to be exactly 1,000 years, or could that be a figure of speech or a symbol? Well, there's dozens of other symbols in the book of Revelation. It's not something to fight about. But ultimately, I mean, again, wow, what a powerful book that points us to Christ as the victor over sin and death, and he is our rescuer. So, Sean, thanks for your call tonight. I hope that sheds some light on it. Go back and read it again. See what you think. in light of some of the things I shared there about currency and buying and selling, and the Jewish people being offended at the Roman currency, and those who thought the emperor was deity, and all of the spectacle that he made of them persecuting Christians. I mean, a lot of it does seem to fit, not to mention Rome being a city on 7 hills. All right, call us back anytime, Sean. Great to hear from you. Let's go to Lake Charles, Louisiana, and we'll talk with Chris. Hey, Chris.
How you doing, Mr. Farley? Just was calling about Romans 7, where Paul says there's no longer him that sinned, but sin that dwelled in him.
Yeah.
But as Christians, we walk through the day. We know we still sin sometimes, and the Bible tells us that we shouldn't. So I'm kind of confused on that part.
Okay, yeah. Chris, that's a great question. I mean, he's talking about source here, and I always have believed that Romans 7 is really about Paul before salvation. You could title this chapter, I Fought the Law, and the Law Won. Because this is his confrontation with law-based living. I mean, why would I say that? Well, he says he's fleshly. He says he's sold in bondage to sin. He says the law that I thought was going to give me life actually brought death. Okay, who would be a person who would think the law would bring them life? Well, that would be a devout Pharisee, not a Christian. Every Christian in their right mind knows that they don't get life from the law. So when he says the law that I thought would bring life actually brought death, he's talking about his story, his testimony as a devout Pharisee. He was fleshly. He was sold in bondage to sin, it says. Well, that's not a Christian. Christians aren't sold in bondage to sin. Romans 6 says if you've died, you've been freed from sin. So we as Christians are freed from sin. We're not sold in bondage to sin. We've been bought by God, bought with a price. And so you look at this passage and you see that he's basically saying, I discovered a principle in me. Verse 21, I find this principle that evil is present in me, the one who wants to do good. So if you interviewed every Pharisee who ever lived and said, hey, do you want to do good? They would say, oh, I wake up every day and I try to do good. I try to do my best. Well, what happens to you? Well, if they know what they're talking about, they're going to say, yeah, evil is present in me. I find this evil principle inside me. It's holding me captive. It's holding me hostage. It's no longer I who do it, but sin living in me. So if you get my drift here, Paul is telling his story. He's giving his testimony as a devout Pharisee living under the law. And what do you discover under the law? You discover that you're a slave of sin, that you're sold in bondage to sin, that you need rescuing. So at the end of the story, he says, who will rescue me? And the answer is Jesus Christ. How? Well, through salvation, of course. As Paul is crucified, buried, and raised, he dies to sin. He's freed from sin. He's no longer sold in bondage to sin. But to answer your question, he's basically telling his story of this parasite called sin that had totally enslaved him. So when he says it's no longer I who do it, but sin living in me, when he says that twice, it's no longer I, but sin. It's no longer me, but it's sin living in me. He's telling the story of his addiction to this power called sin and that he needed rescue. How did the rescue come? It came through new birth, through death, burial, and resurrection into Christ Jesus. So, yes, we Christians still sin. We still commit sins. But if you were to want to know about the source of those thoughts, you could truly say today, you know what? The reason I sin today is when I get duped, when I get deceived, when I get tricked, when I let a parasite control me, and it doesn't even have to. I've died to sin. I'm freed from sin's power. I don't have to say yes to sin. And if I could recognize that because I'm a new person at my core, that parasite that once enslaved me doesn't enslave me any longer. It's all bark and no bite. Yes, it has a persistent call. There's a temptation and an accusation there. But I don't have to believe it. I don't have to take it at face value. I don't have to own it and call it me. It's not me. There's a power at work that is not me. You are not the power of sin. You're a child of God. You can count yourself dead to sin and alive to God. So do Christians still commit sins? Yes, but only when they let that parasite called sin dominate them. So this passage is about the source. It's answering those questions like, where do the dirty thoughts come from? Where do the lustful thoughts come from? Well, they come from a power called sin. Adam fell and the whole world was enslaved by this power. Yet today we have real freedom in Jesus, and we don't have to give in to those nasty thoughts. We can set our minds on really great things in Jesus Christ. So, Chris, I hope that encourages you tonight, my friend. Please call us back anytime. Let's go to Indiana now, and we'll talk with Ann. Hi, Ann. What do you got for us tonight?
Hi, Andrew. Thank you for taking my call.
Yes.
I've never been on a radio before, so I'm very nervous.
Well, take your time. You're good.
I have questions about Galatians 6:1.
Yeah.
I have a friend who I was concerned about, and I interpreted this. I was led to read this, and I interpreted it as I needed to bring it to his attention. Okay. And I thought about it for several days, and I finally sent him a message that I needed to address it. And now it has gotten up. Now I've lost my friend, and he called me dirt and dead, and he hopes the power of Satan gets me. But did I misinterpret that? If I feel that my friend is doing something wrong and committing a serious sin, that I should bring it to their attention and prize it?
Okay, yeah. No, I don't think you interpreted it wrong. I'm so sorry this has happened, Dan. Here's what I would say. I think the root of what occurred here perhaps is just that you sent him a message, and it was an email or maybe a text, maybe a voicemail, but it sounds like to me that you sent it by text or email, and it shocked him. I mean, it was a one-liner. It was a few sentences, something short, and he didn't get the tone of your voice. He didn't get the heart behind your concern for him, and so he interpreted it as, she wants to get me. She wants to catch me. She wants to confront me in this struggle that I have, and it's going to embarrass me. It's going to humiliate me. It's going to make me feel uncomfortable. I mean, I would imagine that he has misinterpreted your heart and misinterpreted your motive because it came to him in written form. And so, obviously next time you have a concern like this, you could simply say, hey, do you want to get some coffee? And just leave it at that, and then wait and share your heart with him face to face without bringing up the topic in written form, because I'm sure it just alarmed him. It shocked him. It took him by surprise. Now, obviously he has an issue going on in his life, and we're not excusing that in the slightest. Are you in your right mind to be concerned? Absolutely. Galatians 6 says this, brothers and sisters, if a person is caught in any wrongdoing, you who are spiritual are to restore such a person in a spirit of gentleness, each one looking to yourself, so that you are not tempted as well. The next verse says, bear one another's burdens, and therefore fulfill the law of Christ. And then it says, for if anyone thinks that he is something when he is nothing, he deceives himself. So what does Paul know? Paul knows there's two ways to confront somebody. There's the first way, which is where you think you're really something. Now, that's not your heart. That wasn't how you want to approach him. But he might imagine that, and that's why he's called you names and accused you, and he's wrong in doing that. But nevertheless, looking at this passage, it's interesting that Paul recognizes, confronting people about things that they're struggling with is a very difficult task. You have to show sensitivity and gentleness. He says, restore such a person in a spirit of gentleness, and then always have this attitude. Here it is. That could happen to me too. Maybe it's drug abuse. Well, that could happen to me too. Maybe it's pornography. Well, that could happen to me too. Maybe it's some sort of dishonest move financially. Well, that could happen to me too. And that's the attitude Paul is talking about as we approach people, that any one of us, any Christian, can be tempted by anything at any time. And when we recognize that, then we can approach others who are struggling. We can approach them with humility. Now, to be clear, I don't think there was anything wrong with your motive or your heart in this. I think you've just been misunderstood. And, maybe you've already tried this. You've already tried to explain, hey, I just want you to know that I care about you, that I'm concerned about you, that I wanted to talk this through because I want God's best for you. I want you to be healthy going forward, and if there's anything I can do to help you. So that would be the healthy, proper attitude to approach someone who is struggling. What can I do for you? How can I help you? I see that you're struggling in this way. What can I do to be a friend here? And that's what Paul is describing in Galatians chapter 6. And again, he says, if anyone thinks that he is something when he is nothing, he deceives himself. You could see how people get really arrogant. I'm not talking about you in the slightest here, but I'm talking about church situations where there's been abuse and finger pointing and accusation and slander and a lack of trust. I mean, this stuff happens all the time when we approach someone with the wrong attitude. I don't know you, but it sounds like you were just doing your best to be a great friend, and I'm sorry that this has happened. Yes, what you were attempting to do is biblical. If you want to take that extra step and try to explain your heart and explain your motives again, sure, give that a shot. But ultimately, you can't control his response. He's feeling, he's feeling guilty, perhaps. He's feeling accused. He's feeling scared. He doesn't want this brought to light, perhaps. So it's a delicate matter for him, and he's overreacted because of all that. That part, certainly not your fault. So I tell you what, I'll pray for you that God would give you wisdom in how to navigate this going forward. Ultimately, you may find yourself needing to forgive him. Forgive him for the way he misunderstood you. Forgive him for the way that he overreacted. Forgive him for the way that he accused you. And, he may never recover from this. Some people get so defensive about their struggles that they shut the door. We don't know. We can't control that part. You can only control your response to this. So love him, forgive him, be gentle going forward, explain yourself the best you can, and then let the chips fall where they may. You certainly can't dictate his response. So, Ann, thank you so much for calling in tonight, for trusting us with your question. Great to hear from you. Please call us back anytime. Well, speaking of time, we're out of time, and that's all we've got for tonight. But if you'd like to support us and help us reach our year-end goal, we've got a matching grant of $87,000. How incredible is that? We want to match that grant in full. So your gift of $500 turns into $1,000. Your gift of $100 turns into $200. That's pretty amazing. Go to our website right now. Give your best gift before year's end to help us reach our goal. Go to andrewfarley.org. That's andrewfarley.org. Click on the Donate tab. It takes just a couple of minutes to give your gift today.
For more information on Andrew's books, please visit andrewfarley.org. That's andrewfarley.org. Join us every week at this time as we invite you to celebrate the freedom of God's grace. Goodbye, everybody.